Lock her up. Lock her up. You guys are good. Damn right. You're exactly right. There's nothing wrong with that. And you know why? And you know why? You know why we're saying that? We're saying that because if I, a guy who knows this business, if I did a tenth of what she did, I would be in jail today. So, crooked Hillary Clinton, leave this race now.
Hi, and welcome to the Bruce channel. I'm Bruce, and hello, boys and girls. Can you spell irony? Quite a few years ago, there was a weekly program called That Was the Week That Was, sometimes called TW3. It began with the BBC. A couple of years later, it was on American television. By default, since in the UK it was on in 62 and 63, arguably the biggest week that ever was would have had to have been the weekend of John Kennedy's assassination. It is not so clear what would be in second place. Were it still on the air, though, the week that just was would be in the running. As the week wore on, one front-page story after another was bypassed and overtaken. We were off last week for the holiday, and I thought that Charlie Rose was a big deal. But, Wednesday this week, Matt Lauer's firing from the Today Show made that seem like an hors d'oeuvre. And Garrison Keillor, later the same day, gone from Minnesota Public Radio. That was almost an afterthought. NPR also fired a senior officer, and that paled. Then Friday, when the Republicans were poised to once and for all pick the pocket of the middle class and offer complete lies about it, I might say, all bets were off. Michael Flynn, the disgraced former National Security Advisor to he who must not be named, pleaded guilty to a pretty routine felony, lying to the FBI. Why? Well, the only logical conclusion is because he's talking about the higher-ups, and so they said, all right, make the deal. That's how these things go. He's saving his ass, and likely a part of his thinking is he's saving his son's ass, too. The only way to do that is plead to a single felony. Probably won't even have to serve any time. Well, it's pretty well the story of the day. Probably will be for a while. Even at Fox News, ever in the tank for this excuse of a president, there wasn't much they could do to offset the news. One host even said that the ruse, that this has been fake news, is a lie. Wow, on Fox. In court, the document charged that, at the direction of a senior transition team member, at his direction, he did call Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Kislyak. No one knows who that senior member is. No one knows yet. So I'd mentioned the Republican Party in the Senate picked our pockets, and they lied about it. On one hand, they crow. They've doubled the standard deduction. Yeah, but they've taken away the personal exemptions. A family of four, they get $12,000 more in standard deduction, but they lose $16,400 in exemption, $4,400 more taxable income. I don't know if the worst thing was that out of Congress this week, but we also learned that in the House of Representatives, non-disclosure settlements with women who had accused House members of sexual harassment, the woman's silence was paid for by a House fund, that is your tax dollars, my tax dollars, paid to hide the sleaze. Regarding the harassment, as I've said, it's not partisan. Both parties have had their slime balls. So the thing about he who must not be named, why? Why? It's easy to figure out why he does some things that are outrageous. It's the magician's misdirection. Look over here while I do that. You know, he doesn't want more attention given to the investigation. But it's unfathomable why he time and time again does so gratuitously off the mark. He seemingly can't help himself. He has to blow his own horn. Last week he tweeted that Time magazine called him and said he would probably be Man of the Year again. Time quickly responded, nope, not a speck of truth in that. First of all, I checked. No one has ever been named in consecutive years. 2, there's always speculation. And maybe he, maybe she, maybe... But they also guard their choice. Rigorously, they guard their choice. By the way, my speculation for this year, I don't know what name they might use. Previously, American women have been named. In a different year, it was the whistleblowers. So this year, I don't know, the American women whistleblowers? Or the Me Too women? I think their impact has been paramount. So anyway, what's wrong with him? He's like Dudley in Harry Potter. If he can't be the center of attention, he throws a tantrum. Although he regularly disdains Time magazine, last year when he was named Person of the Year, he called it a great honor. But if he disdains the magazine, isn't that a bit self-contradictory? He is not Time's Person of the Year. However, were they to create a new category, on a peripheral topic, I was deeply saddened by some news this week. There's a guy. In many ways, he reminds me of myself, although he is intellectually light years ahead of me. But in his idealism, in his passion, I've looked up to him and admired him for years, and although my thing is to flit about, most of the time my goal is entertaining you with, a song? A light song, a torch song? Maybe with a pun or a corny joke. Maybe I can elicit laughs or tears in theater or more recently in film.
Did anything of that sort ever happen to you whilst you were in the army?
Marines. No.
Ah, quite right. Aim high!
But sometimes, both in my personal relationship and in these very get-togethers that we have had, I have on occasion made observations of things that I think need more light shown on them, whether it's GMOs or politics or corruption. I believe it my sacred duty as a citizen. I want my society to succeed. I want the people who are in my society, all of them, to succeed. I want the world to succeed. So if I see something I believe in my heart ought to be considered, I say it. And that's what an engaged citizen does. Well, although he's capable of eliciting smiles through clever humor, my hero, Keith Olbermann, much more eloquent, much more gifted, much more cerebral than I, and possibly even more passionate, announced this week that it was to be his last edition of The Resistance. Like me, he grew up in a country in which he could take pride, not always agreeing with leaders, but he allowed for difference of opinion. But he would rail against injustice. And like me, he was horrified by the vanity, the over-the-top self-adulation, and the ignorance on obvious display by he who occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And so for 188 episodes, usually several a week, he would simply say with clarity, in under 10 minutes usually, sometimes half that, he would make video essays and commentaries, and he backed his statements with facts and with timelines, facts, by the way, that even his critics could never refute. He would point out the new outrages and perfidies that had been most recently performed by these hacks and liars who, from all appearances, have hijacked our government. I suggest you give his eloquence a look-see and view his video essays. Simply Google Keith Olbermann, GQ, The Resistance. Some combination of that will get you there. Or go to YouTube and enter The Resistance, Keith. You don't have to watch them in order, but I'd suggest that it might be a better way to do that. Or simply go back 20, 25 episodes and then watch them in forward sequence. You might not like them, you might like them. You may agree, you may disagree, but if you watch with an open mind, I believe you will find his reasoning sound, and it will be impossible to doubt his sincerity. In closing that final episode, here's what he had to say.
And so this series is over. This was intended as something temporary, a 2-month project by somebody who had given up politics. And instead it became 187 commentaries and around 225,000 words and something approaching 400 million views. And I am proud of it, and I repudiate none of it. And it has been my privilege to do it, and I'm especially proud to have done these videos for free and for charity. No illness, no scandal, no firing, just I've said what I've had to say. It was as obvious as I made it seem.
I, and millions of others, will miss him. So, I've lived lots of places. I read a lot of publications and online, a lot of local publications, that is the local websites in the various cities in which I've lived, try to keep up with things. I find it interesting that virtually all of them have kept me apprised of each local area's attempts to land the new Amazon headquarters. You probably know, but if you don't, Amazon will build a campus, a second headquarters. I don't really understand that. How do you have two headquarters? Is one the headquarters and the other the sub-headquarters? Anyway, semantics aside, they're trying to get it in Cleveland. Here in North Carolina, they're trying to get it in Charlotte and Raleigh, even in Hickory, North Carolina. Cleveland's got a lot going for it, but there's the weather. Toronto's trying too, but there's the weather. Detroit and Chicago, there's the weather. Charlotte and Atlanta don't have the weather issues, but the traffic is awful in both places. And both airports are gigantic, which of course means business travelers, and I imagine they'd be doing some of that. Business travel eats up a lot more of your time if traffic is bad, and then you have to go to the terminal and it takes another 45 minutes to get to your gate. So, they're making these, it's like trying to land the Olympics, except if you win, it's ongoing. And traffic is going to get a whole lot worse.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog. You cry all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. You cry all the time. Well, you ain't nothing but a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine. When I said you was high class, well, that was just a lie. They said you was high class, well, that was just a lie. Yeah, you ain't never but a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine.
So did you hear about the sting gone wrong at the Washington Post? The special Senate election in Alabama is December 12th, and Fruit Salad Roy Moore is still claiming that the tales of him going after under 18 girls when he was in his 30s is just a plot. Never mind that the stories check out. Never mind that it was well known around Gadsden that he hung out at the mall, that he hung out around high school cheerleaders. It's all a plot, he says. So, a woman contacted one of the Post reporters who broke the original story, and she said she wanted to add her story. She was interviewed, and see, this is what the Moore believers say. They say it's a conspiracy. Well, there were some holes in this woman's story, and the Post followed up, as they are wont to do. Turns out she was making it all up. She was apparently put to it by a right-wing group, which she identifies with, in the hopes that the Washington Post would run the story and then they would, in return, prove it was a false claim, thereby, they hoped, offering proof that the accusations were a plot and thus not to be believed. Google it. It's an amazing caper. Almost like a Mission Impossible plot. So, as usual, over the Thanksgiving holiday, many basketball teams participate in tournaments. They'll do it over the upcoming holidays, too. High school teams, college teams, they receive invitations to play nearby, maybe regionally, sometimes nationally. So, one such tournament is the Barclays Center Classic. It's in Brooklyn, New York. One of the Saturday games featured the Golden Gophers of Minnesota, coached by Richard Pitino, that's son of the now disgraced coach Rick Pitino, recently fired from Louisville. I digress. Minnesota's opponent, Alabama's Crimson Tide. Minnesota had a comfortable lead in the second half, 13, 14 points, and a player got a little chippy. And he was hit with a technical foul, and then a moment later, a second technical foul, so that ejects him. And then Pitino got a little chippy, and he got hit with a technical. In a matter of seconds, the lead was down to 9. But tempers were high. Tempers were high. So, a small scuffle. No punches were even thrown.
Sexton's got it. You know he's going to want to make something happen. One of the best freshmen in the country. Double team. Finds the senior, Riley Norris. It's a 7-point game.
And it almost wouldn't have mattered. Except on the court, the scuffle happened in front of Alabama's bench. Every Alabama player edged closer to the fight, ready to help their teammates if necessary. Lots of pushing, lots of shoving. Yes, the coaches were out there trying, along with the officials, to restore order. There was like a 15-minute break while they were sorting this all out. See, as in other sports, the officials have access to the game recording. Technicals?
A scuffle underneath, and players ready to throw.
See, by rule, if a player who is not one of the 5 players in the game at that moment, if a player steps from the sidelines into the playing court, automatic ejection. Automatic ejection. And, the video shows all the players from the bench were on the court. All the players were ejected, leaving only the 5 players who were playing at the time. The only players who could play for the next 10 minutes or so. Wow. And then
Washington trying to put the moves on Sexton. Washington, no. And a foul on the floor. And that's it. That is number 5. Number 5 on Ingram. And Alabama only has 4 players left.
Ingram fouls out, so there's no one to replace him. It's like a power play in hockey when someone's in the penalty box, except it was the rest of the game. And then
might see a lot of that the rest of the way with an odd man rush for Minnesota. Petty, no good on the 3, and he's hurt. Petty is grabbing the foot. Alabama's playing with 4 players and now down to 3 as Fitzgerald lays it in, and Petty is in agony.
Yeah. Down to an injury. And no one's allowed in. You can Google the game. I promise you, casual basketball fan or a hoops fanatic, you will never have seen anything like it. I mean, they're playing a 1-2 zone. Typically a zone would be a 2-3. They're playing a 1-2 zone and making it embarrassing for Minnesota. So they've got 5 against 3, and they have substitutions. They almost lost the game. The difference got down to as few as 3 points. The final was 5, 89-84. 5 against 3.
Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came, and it stayed. For years, I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too.
All right, welcome back. Remember, you can write to us at the Bruce Channel at yahoo.com. You can watch all of our previous episodes at either our Facebook page or at tinyurl.com/Bruce Channel. Okay, so I ran across some pictures. You recognize this young student? Or this one? Or this one, I think probably around middle school years. As he grew, he became an athlete, you know? Whoa! No surprise then when he adopted a pretty cool swagger. Advance a few more years, no, not Steve Harvey. The best is the giveaway, right? Everyone's favorite astrophysicist. All right, let's be honest. Does anyone know any other astrophysicists besides Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson? Anyway, I bring it up because I found a very enjoyable clip. There's a web series known as First We Feast, and they talk about whatever it is the expertise of the guest is. There have been some other notables. James Franco and Bryan Cranston have been on it. Anyway, what they do, the host and the guest talk about whatever. In this case, it was the universe, as they make their way through chicken wings covered with hot sauce. 10 or 11 varieties of hot sauce. Each step is hotter than the one before, as measured by standard Scoville units. And it's pretty fun to watch.
We don't spend enough time lamenting inadequacies of our own language. We just stuck with it and we use it, and that's it. And often the language shapes how you think. I mean, linguists have known this forever. So I'm still angry that we don't have a good word for highly spicy flavors other than calling it hot. When the word hot, I would rather use for temperature.
I wouldn't mind being there. I certainly would have liked to listen to that conversation, but were I partaking, I would have been an early dropout in the sauce parade. All right, in just 3 weeks, it'll be Christmas Eve. You may have seen this, I had, but I'd forgotten just how good it was, and it was really great to discover it's still available for viewing on the net. And I'm speaking of the wonderful Text Santa spoof that was performed by the cast of Downton Abbey some years ago, with a couple of guest stars, including George Clooney. I realized while watching it not only how brilliant it was, but I realized I'd forgotten some of the key elements of the plot. It's only about 10 minutes or so. Anyway, to really get, you can enjoy it, but to really get it, you'll have to have watched Downton Abbey, because the lines are funny enough, but it is the nuance of the characters giving those lines that gives rise to much of the humor. So knowing that nuance does help with some of the plot twists. If you Google Text Santa Downton Abbey, like, you'll find two, because they did a follow-up the following year. The one you want to see, though, is dated 2014. All right, a quickie before we wrap. You know that some comedy is known as slapstick? Well, it got that name from this. This is a slapstick. Yeah, in the old days, someone off stage would slap it to coincide with the slap of a hand across the face, or it could also be added to film when it was being edited to make a bigger sound, as when Moe would slap Larry or Curly or even Shemp. And it's December. December is Thai month. Yes, it is, really. In this upcoming week, Thursday is Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Saturday the 9th is International Day of Veterinary Medicine, and I'm cool with that. I've got a couple of furry children, so I'm all for vets. Monday, tomorrow, is Wear Brown Shoes Day, but don't overlook Tuesday, the 5th, when it's Bathtub Party Day. Really? All right, so knowing all of this, you are now better prepared to face the week ahead, and I hope that the week ahead is the best one you've ever had. Oh, wait, bring it back. Today, December 3rd, tonight, supermoon. I hope your skies are clear. Okay.